Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So this video is for my spiritual peeps, or the people watching this interested in getting into spirituality. I'm going to be discussing my spirituality beginner tips. I've been spiritual for a couple of years now and I've learned quite a lot over that time. I have a whole video on my personal spirituality journey, so if you're interested in that specifically, go check that video out on my channel. I will link it down below. But more importantly today, I'm going to be discussing my beginner tips for people who are looking to get into it. What I would personally recommend, what I found works for me, and some kind of tips and rules I've learned over the time I've been spiritual. First thing to note, I think, is there is so many different ways to be spiritual. So you have the kind of more strict practices and religions based around spirituality, but also something I love about it is there is so much freedom. You don't have to label it, you don't have to call yourself a witch. Not everyone who practices spirituality is a witch, or is Wiccan, or even practices witchcraft. For me personally, I've never done anything I would specifically label under witchcraft. I more work with crystal energy, manifestation, divination, tarot, connecting with spirit guides and working with them. As much as this all ties into spirituality, it doesn't really go under a specific label. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm gonna get into the tips I've wrote down to discuss with you guys and hopefully to help some people. So the first thing I've wrote down is around crystals. I find a lot of people when they get into crystals, including myself when I first started out, look at kind of what the crystal is meant to be good for. So people will go for specific things like, oh, I'm looking for love and romance, I'm gonna go for rose quartz. I'm looking to de-stress, I'm gonna go for amethyst. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that because at the end of the day they do all have specific properties that they're good for. And still now I will look at the properties of a crystal when choosing what I think will be fitting to my life at that point, what I want to work with. Specifically if I'm doing a crystal grid or something, I will look at what crystals have what properties and what will be fitted to what I'm trying to manifest. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. However, I tend to find the best way of picking crystals is instead just literally going for what you feel drawn to. This is harder to do if you order offline, but if you're in a crystal shop and you've got all the crystals out in front of you, just see where your eyes go, what you find you keep going back to, what you find you feel drawn to, and what takes your focus. Because usually that's because the energy of the crystal is bouncing off of your energy, and because that specific crystal is good for you at that point in time. Because I've found I've picked up and bought crystals that are supposedly good for me at that point in my life, and I haven't found any connection with them, I haven't felt drawn to them. So personally for me, most of the time now if I'm in a crystal shop, I will just go for what I'm drawn to. Whether the properties of that crystal are meant to be good for me or not, I'll trust that I'm drawn to that crystal for a reason, and that carrying it around or using it and working with it will benefit me in some way. And actually I find a lot of the time now, if I am drawn to a specific crystal, and I buy it and then I search the properties up after I've bought it, it usually does fit to me at that point in time, so I feel like there's a reason I was drawn to it, you know? It's because it was actually good for me. My next tip is when it comes to manifesting or working on spell jars, crystal grids, whatever it is, I've learned that not every single technique and not every single way is going to work for you. I've tried so many forms of manifestation and majority of them haven't worked for me. I tried the 369 technique, I tried writing a diary entry as if it was a year from now, stating what I wanted my life to look like. I tried writing a letter to the universe as if I already had what I wanted, and I didn't find any of that really worked for me. However, doing crystal grids is something I've always found to be successful for me. I've always seen a good outcome, and I've had like weird things happen when I've been crystal gridding. I've always found that something comes from that for me, and I've also found certain affirmations to be a helpful form of manifestation. My point is, different things work for everyone. Don't try one technique, find it doesn't work, and then just lose hope. Try different things, try what you feel you're drawn to, and I guarantee you will find a technique that does genuinely work for you and that you see good results from. So what I wrote down for the next tip is focus on beginner steps first, don't dive in the deep end. I know it can be so tempting when you start out, you get excited, you want to delve into everything at once. Ultimately, as much as there are parts of spirituality that don't have rules, and as much as there's not really an order of how to get into it, there are definitely things that are more beginner friendly when you're going into it. So I wrote down that good starting steps are crystals. If you get into crystals, learning how to cleanse them, how to cleanse your space, which can be done really simply with either incense or sage. Also learning about meditation, and research is your best friend. Find some sites that are good and that you trust. Get some different books, they're all reasonably priced. You can get them in places like The Works or local spiritual shops. Research is ultimately your best friend when you're starting out. But I'd personally say don't just take information from one site or book, fact check it. If you read something you're interested in, research further into it, check if it's true. I also wrote down that something that I personally found helpful to learn about was actually chakras. That's not everyone's starting point, but for me it was something that helped me to learn about energy and to learn about what chakras are and how to work with them. I don't really know many people who have started out learning about chakras, but I just personally would recommend it because it's a starting point that I found was helpful. And at the end of the day, they're literally part of us. My next tip is literally be led by what feels right, tune into your intuition. For me personally, I use my intuition and to help me on my path and to work out what things to work on and focus on. Like I said before, there's no specific order. Ultimately, it is what feels right to you at that point in your life. Another tip I'd have is if you don't already have friends or people around you that are also into spirituality, making some friends in that community could be really beneficial, or even just following some trusted spiritual pages. Having people within that community to learn and grow with, to discuss different things with, to learn from, is so unbelievably helpful when you are getting into it. A personal tip I would say is try and wait to use things like tarot. I wouldn't say that you have to wait too far into it. I think it is something that can be beginner friendly, but just simple things like learning how to cleanse and protect yourself, I would say needs to be learnt before you go into tarot. I jumped into pendulums and tarot readings before I really knew properly how to protect myself or how to cleanse properly or anything, so I kind of freaked myself out with it because I wasn't sure if I was doing it properly. And I'd actually say in terms of things like tarot cards, oracle cards are a better alternative at first. They're easier to read than tarot and a little bit less intense. Tarot will just give you the blunt truth whether you want to hear it or not. Oracle cards will kind of lay it out a little bit more gently. But yeah, in terms of protection and cleansing, you can protect yourself with protective crystals. That's how I usually protect myself during a tarot reading, just having a couple of those near me or wearing one. And in order to cleanse again, you can just use incense or sage. So it's fairly simple, but I would just say wait a little bit before you get into it. Same with pendulums and divination. Can be fairly beginner friendly, but not the first step. Another tip I have is to keep a journal to track everything that you're learning. Honestly, this will be so helpful to look back through and interesting to look back on as well, just to see how far you've come. This is my journal, or some people call it their book of shadows. I always journal about the moons in here. When I started talking to my spirit guides, I documented that as well. I wrote down about my birth chart, about my crystal shop visits and when I got different crystals, documented different tarot readings in here as well if I felt they were significant. And then little pages like this, which is just ways to connect with the universe. Anything that you learn or you feel might be interesting to document, it's a great idea to keep it in that journal. Pretty much, I think that is all the tips I wrote down for today. I definitely could do a part 2 to this. I think I could definitely think of some more tips. So if you guys would like me to do that, let me know and I will make a part 2 to this video. Let's start some conversation down in the comments as well. Anyone who's into spirituality or looking to get into it, if you have questions or maybe you want to make new friends who are spiritual, head down to the comment section and hopefully there can be some good conversation going on in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, hit the thumbs up button. Let me know any of your beginner tips down in the comments or any significant things you felt you've learned in your spiritual journey. Thank you guys for watching and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.